I was awake for that one.
Wasn't that the last one before plenary?
Yeah, I fell asleep.
No, it must have been Tuesday then.
Yeah.
It was Tuesday. No. I don't know. I have no idea.
Yeah, don't look at the days. I just look at the agenda at the hour and I'm like, okay, it's either Tuesday or Wednesday, but
It doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, so my wife was like, are we doing this? And I'm like, it's Wednesday. She's like, no, it's Tuesday. I'm like, sure, whatever. It's Wednesday.
Now Thursday.
It will be Thursday shortly. Is there anybody in the room, Aaron?
We have a few people in the room.
They're hiding out of the camera view.
Can you in the room hear the remote people okay? Okay. It's just really bad audio on the stage here, so I'm having trouble hearing.
Okay.
Are you in that room? Are you in the, is there not a monitor in front of you?
There's no stage monitor in this room.
I feel like that's a lot of the rooms.
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, I don't understand that.
But I don't want to jinx it. I just hope this one goes smoothly.
As long as the slides don't keep dropping every 5 minutes like they did when Aaron was doing his 45-minute thing with OAuth.
Well, or that the clicker didn't work, or that the audio dropped, or that I mean, I think in this pack I got booted out twice. And even on the WebEx, on the side meetings, same thing.
So Cullen says there's a reason for WebEx not working very well there.
Yeah. This is not WebEx's fault.
It's a completely separate infrastructure in country versus everywhere else, right?
Well, there's something about data governance and lawful intercept, and yes.
Yeah.
Shall we get started?
Yeah, sorry.
Yes, please.
Great. Okay, welcome to SCIM session on your Thursday morning local time. We've got 2 hours ahead of us. First, start with a couple of intro slides from the chairs. Starting with the note well on the screen here. This is, please make sure you're familiar with this. The brief reminder of the key points from the Code of Conduct, and make sure you are respectful and extend courtesy to your colleagues and have impersonal discussions to devise solutions for the global internet that meet the needs of diverse technical and operational environments, and be prepared to contribute to the ongoing work of the group. Quick administrative tasks. Is there anybody who we do need to take notes, and we need someone to watch chat? I think I may be able to be the chat watcher from up here. So I'm willing to do that. And we do have the automated note taker from Ecker, which I think will count as one of the note takers, but it would be great to have somebody else either in person or virtually take some notes in the notepad doc linked from the tool here. So anybody willing to volunteer for that? Mainly just, you don't need to transcribe discussions. The main goal is to capture any task, any item to do items or decisions.
You can't run the session.
We do need at least one person to take notes manually.
So I can try and take actions, Aaron. That just means you have to drive most.
Okay.
See, I'm not awake. What am I saying? Main action, I will try. Go ahead.
Sorry, I'll volunteer too, but I am speaking for one of them, so I I'm not a very useful person for that session.
Thanks, Pam. That'd be great. So when Pam is presenting, I guess we'll have Nancy take the action items down.
Yeah.
All right. With that, this has been your 5-minute chair's intro. We're going to have 4 different topics to cover today. Is there anything else anybody would like to add at the last minute here? Because I think we have a couple of extra minutes available on the agenda. Any agenda gardening, as it were? If not, we will just jump right in. So we'll start with SCIM use cases, short update from Paulo and Pam, and then Danny will cover 2 topics, group member resource interoperability profile, and I believe Pam is then presenting the SCIM agentic schema and endpoints.
Okay, so I think it's going to be really short. So
Great.
same request as last time, right? So there isn't many changes. So me and Pam review it many times. Elliot did the review and Dean also the review. We need more reviewers, right? So I think we need more reviewers. Now I'm questioning. So I had a conversation with Nancy when I was with her in Amsterdam. I think we need more reviewers. I don't know. Opening to the group to provide feedback. Just bear in mind that this is part of the chart that we have for this group. So I think it's really important for us to finish this work. And right now, me and Pam can review it again, and we can review as many times as it's needed, but without more help, I don't know.
Let's get volunteers to review besides the chairs. So can we get a couple people?
I was going to ask first, Paulo, the reviews that you've gotten so far, did that result in any updates or changes?
Yes,
to the doc?
yes.
And those are published in the latest version?
Yes. So so the first update, it was a couple of IETFs ago from Elliot. Then Dean did a great job, and we even talked about all the changes that Dean proposed, and I did the changes with Pam, and we also open it to discussion, and we didn't have more feedback, so we leave it like that. So all of this generates a couple of changes, but I think we need more views on it, right?
Okay, great, thanks. So yes, any volunteers? Oh, we have Unmesh.
I was just going to ask, when do you need the reviews completed by?
Next ITF.
Okay. Yeah, I can help.
Great, we've got 4 volunteers. Amazing. We've got Unmesh, Macy, Danny, and Paul. So yeah, for reviews, just make sure you post comments to the list, the mailing list, and we appreciate it.
And that's all. Quick, less than 5 minutes.
All right. With that, we'll turn it over to Danny for group.
Hold
Nancy,
on. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Nancy.
I'm trying to put that in the minutes. The volunteers were Umesh, Danny.
Macy and Paul.
Thank you. Just trying to capture it in minutes. Thanks.
Yep. And Danny, I will share your slides and give you control.
Thank you. Okay, yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Danny Zollner. If you've been to one of these before, you've probably seen me talking about things. A couple of weeks ago, I published 2 new drafts to the IETF data tracker for SCIM. This is the first one. So there's a long-standing. Let me go ahead and move slides forward. Otherwise, I'm going to talk about everything with just the title slide. So yeah, there's a long-standing problem in SCIM. Many directories have groups that are very large, and SCIM represents members of a group as values in an array, values in a multi-valued attribute. Pagination in SCIM only works for resources, so you can have a list of different users or different groups, but you cannot paginate a list of values in an array. So members in values in the members attribute on a group within a single group. And then that lack of pagination requires group members to be returned in a single HTTP response, or what a lot of implementers have done is just opt to not return group members, or not return them above a certain size. It's all sorts of like weird, inconsistent behavior. But if you have a group with 1 million members today, the only way that is spec compliant to actually send the list of the 1 million members is in one HTTP response, and that doesn't really hold up in practice. So if that's the problem, this draft is proposing a solution. So the draft introduces a group members, or I guess a group member resource type with the corresponding /group members resource endpoint. And then to sort of help with the overall solution, I've also defined in the draft an extension that goes onto the group resource, so the existing group object, called members metadata, that contains a few things that tell clients what's going on. Essentially, hey, this group might have members, but you're not going to see them here at /groups. You have to go to /group members instead, and a few other things. So this helps to address that inability to paginate group memberships, because it changes the list of members from being values in an array to each group membership is its own resource, which then you can use all of the cool stuff in SCIM, like two forms of pagination, whatever. And then it also sort of, just by virtue of setting it up as a new resource, means that you can go and create a new group membership with a post to /group members and remove a group membership with delete. In the draft, I've said that put and patch HTTP methods aren't allowed, because generally a membership shouldn't really be mutable. It's sort of like either an object is a member of a group or it isn't. There's not a whole lot to update once that link is established. So here is a JSON, SCIM JSON example of a group member resource. It's made up of a couple parts. So there's an attribute called group, which then contains the value that is the ID of we'll call it the parent group. There is the attribute member, which a value containing the value of the member. Both have the $ref, optional to implement, and member has also an optional type if the service provider wants to say, this is a user, or this is another group, or a device, or what have you. And then the members metadata extension for the group resource. It's all sort of still work in progress. The draft is version 0.0. The schema namespace, honestly, the existence of some of these attributes, I'm looking for feedback more than anything. So the members metadata attribute has a policy attribute, which the little box here on this slide defines what each of them are. Essentially, is the membership going to be shown on the group object, in a list of group member objects, or both? And then ref is just a link with a filter to say to the /group members endpoint that if you go there, it will give a list of group members that are a member of the group, because this members metadata attribute would be on the group resource rather than the group members endpoint. And there's an account thing as well, because that helps to figure out what's going on. Here's just a more JSON-y example. y'all can look at that on your own time. And then I throw a slide here at the end. This is, I think, the last real slide with a couple of the other options that have been discussed on the SCIM working group mailing list, or just in conversations I've had over the years of other ways to solve this problem and more. So there's at least one draft published, I think 8 or 9 years ago, that would add pagination for multi-valued attributes. And then I've also had discussions in the past with people on the concept of paginating essentially just the body of the SCIM resource. So it's all just like a blob until you finish paginating it. Both of them are complicated. And the second bullet here on the right of that first section is really key. The complication means that it's probably going to take longer to get to a broadly implementable solution, because we're solving for more use cases. And today, from a practical sense, group memberships are the only thing that are ever coming close to to the size limits in an HTTP response, where this is causing actual production issues today. We're not seeing implementations of users with roles or entitlements or email addresses or anything of that sort that go to the point of an HTTP response that's in megabytes or of size, and causing out of memory exceptions or whatever. Also had discussions on HTTP layer solutions. I'm not an HTTP expert. I'm going to sound dumb if I try and talk about this too much. Things sort of streaming and chunking, they're complex to implement. They may be viable, but when you think of, I guess, broad implementation, easier adoption, all that, to me, it didn't sound like the right solution. And then another one that I know has been discussed on the SCIM mailing list in the past would be a sub-resource model. So that's something like /groups /ID, so the ID of the group, and then /members. And so that wasn't chosen versus a root sort of group members endpoint, because if you have, I don't know, 10,000 groups, you would have to make 10,000 individual calls to /groups /ID number 1 /members. And then starting to think about other things. There's been drafts, I was one of the authors on a draft for a Delta query or change detection, whichever draft a year or two ago. And I think anything that positions group members more as a top level resource rather than something weird and semi bespoke, even if it's standardized, means that it'll be able to benefit from any other improvements that the standard has over time. Then next slide, I think. Okay, yes, that is the last slide. I've already gotten one pretty comprehensive round of feedback from somebody on the SCIM mailing list for this, but I would like as much feedback as I can possibly get. If anybody has opinions right now, we've got I guess 11 minutes out of the 20 minutes allocated for this. Also happy to receive feedback on the mailing list via the GitHub repo that is in the draft. Yeah, I'll stop talking.
Thank you, Danny. Yes. If anybody has any comments about this and would like to discuss, we do have a few minutes. Please put yourself into the queue with the little hand raise button. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, this is Matokio from Rakuten. So just a quick question on that last note on the final slide. I mean, it does seem like the sub-resources look like a more natural way to do this. Can you elaborate a little bit more on why is it not being chosen?
Sure. So the sub-resource group /ID /members, I think is the second place finisher in my mind. I had considered also trying to include both a /group members and a ID groups ID members into the same draft, but that creates its own two things competing with each other problem. But so if I guess there's implementers at scale, so I'm thinking sort of from the like enterprise desire for like I guess we'll call it identity governance, and reconciling a identity store, what we call like the identity provider, with the identity like directory, the status of a set of applications, and if the whatever the like main provisioning synchronization engine is, if one of the goals there is to I don't regularly check and track that all of the essentially that there hasn't been like drift in membership, and that a new member was not added in a system that was not added intentionally, then with a like root / group members, that can potentially be done in a single call, and you may have to paginate the response, but you can call / group members using structures that exist today. If the SCIM service provider supports the meta.lastModified attribute for a group, that I guess would have to be for the group member object in this case. But if putting some of the like I guess syntactical stuff aside for a bit, if there was a query that was something like give me all group members that were added or removed in the last 1 hour, doing that to / group members means you get it for all of the group memberships that are out there. If we do the sub resource model with groups ID members, then if you have 10,000 groups, you'd have to probably end up doing 10,000 HTTP GET calls with that filter. But that I guess is the main reason why the sub resource model ended up as second place for me when considering like what to write.
Okay, I get it, but I mean, it's like, I mean, I understand the rationale in it. It's just a little bit weird if we like. I'm not sure whether or not someone would basically just call group members and then just try to get members of all groups. That's sort of what your intention was about, but okay, thank you.
Macy's in the queue.
Hey, Danny. I wrote out the feedback in the chat there. One was just on member counts, since one of the goals of this is trying to handle groups with large amounts of members, and computing counts is generally expensive. It could be inclined to just omit it entirely. The other is just small nit on if the word policy is the right word, and kind of related is if you thought about using service provider config for the purpose of that member metadata, and a question on why you didn't go that direction.
Sure. So I'll go through them in order. So the first feedback being counts are expensive. This draft is trying to help with efficiency, performance. I agree with your feedback. I don't have a strong opinion on like keeping the member count sub attribute. I'd be curious if the broader like opinion or broader consensus was that an attribute of that sort should be dropped entirely or just defined as optional, and a service provider can add it if they want to. There's like some benefit to that. Maybe. I don't think I have a like well thought out enough opinion to keep talking about the pros and cons right now. I'm just gonna start rambling, and that is not useful. For the member metadata dot policy, yeah, the name of the anything involved there, whether it's member metadata policy, open to suggestions, open to change. I do not have a strong attachment to any of them. And then to the sort of like 2B, the second part of that, of wondering why it isn't in the service provider config. The scenario that came to mind that led me to write it that way is so right now the SCIM is effectively just users and groups and like broad implementations. There's a devices draft that is in the RSC editor's queue, if my memory is correct. There's work on a draft to define like an agent or AI agent or whatever resource type. And I can see a like possible future where there are going to be systems that have users, they have groups, and then they have something else, devices, agents, whatever. And they may have sort of like multiple sets of groups that don't overlap with each other. There may be, sort of device groups that end up, applying certain policies to the devices in that system. Groups that allow users to be members that do usery things, and those systems may not allow a single group to contain both a user and a device, or a user and an agent, or whichever. I'm not sure if there's a whole lot of that out there today, but that was the scenario that I was, I guess, trying to factor in. That not all not all groups may be like uniformly the same and allow the same member types. Sometimes the SCIM service provider might be representing multiple sort of like interconnected but separate systems that stand behind it. And then the so yeah, it wouldn't be in service provider config because it's it would be a per like group object or per resource thing rather than a global thing. And then the patching, the third one was, would you want to patch any of the meta attributes in membership? So the meta attribute is defined in 7643. It's a sort of a mechanical attribute that's entirely controlled by the SCIM service provider. So the client would never be able to, patch or put or whatever to modify it.
Got it. That all makes sense.
And Nancy had put a note also if you could echo those either in the mailing list or on the GitHub repo that I'm using for this right now. It would be appreciated.
Yep, will do.
Looks like we have 2.5 minutes left. Nobody else is in the queue.
Great. So I guess next steps on this, it'd be great to get some reviews from others on this. Thanks, Macy, for the quick review and comments. Would anybody be willing to do that?
This is Pam. I can volunteer to review.
Yeah, this is Paul. I'm always happy to work with Danny.
Great. That's perfect. Thanks so much. Look forward to your comments on the mailing list.
And just harvest our 1.5 minutes, move on to the next topic.
Sounds good. Let me switch the slides here. Okay, and this one is also Danny. Let me just restart the timer. Go ahead.
Okay, there, I see the timer now. I don't think I have control.
Oh, yes.
There we go. Okay, maybe moved a little too fast. Yeah, it's me, Danny, again. So this is the other draft that I published. It's title also maybe a work in progress, the SCIM interoperability profile. So same general format. So by attempt at describing the problem, SCIM has a lot of features, and a good chunk of them are optional to implement. Whether that's attributes in the schemas that are defined, things like support for HTTP patch, It's optional. The spec says you have to support put as a service provider, but patch is optional. And then there's a whole bunch of stuff that just doesn't actually say, whether it's required or not. And in the real world, that means people think it's optional if they don't like it or want it or need it. So I guess the problems are actually, it's a big pile of problems, not just one clean story like the group thing. But so SCIM also provides like way too many methods to accomplish some like tasks or actions. So if as a SCIM client, I want to go and let's say replace the first name on a user object, Danny. If I'm using HTTP, I could use first like this is a decision of do I use HTTP patch or HTTP put. If I'm using HTTP patch, then the like whole patch ops like structure and with attribute filters in the path of a patch and different syntactical choices, you could come up with a really, really long list of possible like I'll call it like permutations of how you could structure an update to say go update this one attribute that would all technically be valid according to the rules laid out in the spec. And that makes life really hard for SCIM service providers because of the like mainstream or whatever they like the large commercially available or open source SCIM clients that exist out there. They all have slightly different interpretations of different parts of the SCIM spec. They all choose slightly different syntaxes or combinations of syntaxes depending on if something, if it's a how many attributes are being updated and are they single valued, multi-valued, like all that. So that just it's made implementing SCIM, we'll call it like the SCIM tax on SaaS app vendors or just application vendors a lot higher than it reasonably should be. So again, same structure as last time. This draft is attempting to like define a solution to this sort of problem. So the draft sets sort of, we'll call them like modern requirements. I don't know if I actually like the word modern anymore, but too late. Aiming to standardize what SCIM integration between identity providers and we'll call them B2B SaaS applications look like. In that case, generally, the IDP role would be the SCIM client. B2B SaaS would be the service provider. The draft that's out there right now, the 00, has requirements that include, what's listed here. So it tries to rein in the hundreds of possible ways to go and update attributes with the SCIM patch. It defines some minimum required attributes for users and groups sort of in the name of interoperability. Defines minimum requirements for what service providers must support for filtering and pagination, and also puts like a corresponding requirement on clients in a bunch of cases of they will filter by these things and not other things. So like use the end operator and not like starts with or contains. Or I guess it would be equals versus starts with contains. Wrong category of expression stuff. But then also called out certain requirements that are already actually present in RFC 7643 and 7644, but are not clear to most readers. And are therefore commonly implemented incorrectly. So it's essentially just like erasing ambiguity. Sometimes requirements end up getting spread out over a couple of different sections of specification, where there's one line in section 4 and then a paragraph about it in section 6, and when you join them all together, it comes out with like a different end result than if you just look at the big chunk in let's say section 6. I'm pulling the section numbers out of thin air. And then the draft also prohibits certain features or behaviors that are in SCIM 2.0. So from the time of writing that draft, and even within the last like day or so. Some of my opinions based on feedback have changed a little bit on this, but we'll keep moving forward for now. So the HTTP patch simplification, I'm not going to go through like line by line on this, but the goal essentially was to define certain things that either like a client should do or explicitly should not do when using patch. And that those requirements are spread out over single value attributes and then over simple and complex. And then I'll move on to the next slide. Sort of the same approach for things to do and not do for multi-valued attributes. So these slides are available online. You can go read the draft. I don't want to spend the entire session going over the overly complicated patch stuff though. And then some of the features that are like deprecated / prohibited in the current version of the draft says don't use the user password attribute. It's the year 2026, like in the like B2B SaaS, like sort of like workforce scenario, which is where I've seen most of SCIM usage. But I've also lived in that world. Like federation should almost always be used, like synchronizing passwords, or I guess SCIM doesn't even allow for synchronizing password hashes, but yeah, like password synchronization between domains is just asking for trouble. It also explicitly calls out, don't use HTTP put, use patch instead. There's some things that are sort of like implementer's choice in the SCIM spec around if the client sends a request that contains certain things that are unknown or just like invalid from the perspective of the service provider. The service provider can choose to either throw an error or to just sort of like silently ignore or silently modify in transit the things that it didn't like and return a 200 or 201 or whichever, like a success response, even though it turns out it's like three of these attributes I didn't like, or I didn't know what you were trying to tell me, so I just dropped them. Which creates a whole bucket of problems where like changes that were thought to be sent out by the client don't actually end up persisted on the service provider. And then it calls out a few things that are like there in the spec, but I'm not sure if they've really ever seen adoption in like a workforce B2B SaaS IDB like world. So using the like e tags and the like HTTP headers tied to like versioning, and like I'm gonna do like an HTTP patch and don't update this object unless the version is whatever is in this header. And then also filtering, saying patch users where like the department equals sales. Technically, the SCIM spec says you can do one patch and apply the same change to everybody that matches a filter, like change the office location for everybody in sales at once. Nobody actually has implemented that I've seen, at least not like both sides bidirectionally, or whatever, like a client and a server together. And so we're at next step slide. I'm actually going to go back just real quickly to like gloss over one of the things I have had like a change of heart on, which is it also provides some context. So some of these things, I guess the second sub bullet in the second part of the slide says define minimum set of required attributes for users and groups. I am at this point leaning towards trying to rein in the scope of this draft to be about, we'll call it the protocol level interoperability. So that would be things along the lines of the patch syntax stuff, some of the protocol stuff that isn't here in the slides, but how to handle case sensitivity for an attribute, or between let's say conflict detection and filtering on that attribute and its value. I guess protocol level versus defining, like, for users you must do X, for groups you must do Y. And so the trigger for this draft getting written now was in part work that's happening in another working group, the IPSI working group, which is attempting to define interoperability standards that align more to the like the resource data model side of things than this draft, I think, should. So I don't want to like overlap too much with the IPSI draft. My thought process was that if IPSI is targeting more of the like stuff about like users and groups and like what attributes are supported and don't support the password attribute, that sort of thing, that work in IPSI would greatly benefit from something to fix some of the really tricky parts of like the protocol of SCIM. So my current inclination is that maybe to cut out some of the stuff in this draft in the next version and hone in more on protocol, less on data model or whatever you want to call it. Now clicking to the last slide a bunch. Yeah, so that is sort of all I have on this. There was an email with a bunch of feedback on this draft that was sent to the mailing list last week. Same as before, I would appreciate as much feedback as I can get on this one, though.
Great, thank you. Anybody want to comment on this since we have some time? Pam.
So I remember at the end of the last plenary, Deb asked us exactly where we were on revving SCIM, because that was part of the charter. In your mind, Danny, does this feel like a step towards what a SCIM 3.0 could be?
Yes. This feels like, I don't know, sort of an easier to implement version of like we'll call I don't know, it's hard for me to think of like SCIM 3.0 or whatever you want to call it, SCIM 2.1 as anything other than it's like almost like a partial rewrite. I have struggled to envision a like SCIM vNext that doesn't end up being breaking change for some percentage of SCIM 2.0 implementations. And I guess this interoperability like profile would also probably be a breaking change as well. I think ultimately this could be like a seed that grows into a new versioning of SCIM. I'm just hesitant for like it feels a little bit like opening Pandora's box.
Yeah, we don't need to name it right now, but I think the general sentiment was that we've chartered this group to update the core specs. There's a couple of bullet points in the charter that talk about some things that might get updated in the core specs, whether it's called 2.5 or 3.0 or 10 or whatever. It doesn't really matter at this stage. But I guess the question is just, do you think this is the direction? The question to the group would be, is this the direction you would want to see an update to the core specs take? Yes, Paul.
Yeah, I think to answer your question directly, I think the answer for me is yes, because we've had a decade now to see what has and hasn't worked in SCIM. And so it feels like it's an appropriate time to trim the tree a bit and focus on the things that have been implemented and simplify in the spec the things that either never gained adoption or because of subsequent changes are now sort of out of date.
Thanks.
I'll say I think that the like this draft as a standalone. I personally am interested in seeing if that set of changes can get consensus and be moved through the IETF process. In part because I think that a bigger like revision, leading to SCIM v next is likely to take a lot longer because it's a more comprehensive like body of work. So I think that what happens with this draft, honestly, with the last draft, the group members thing, a lot of the things that have happened, and I guess also what like the precursor pagination draft that's now in RFC, a lot of the decisions that get made almost in like a modular, like piece by piece, uh, like series, can likely then be like joined as part of one more like cohesive doc update in the future. But out of almost like what selfishness, I would like to see some of the like real world positive impact that we could get by addressing some of these problems as individual drafts in the next year, 2 years versus. And I'm scared that we're going to be like 4 years on like a 2.1 or a 3.0 or whatever.
Deb.
So I do think there's obviously many ways to do this. You could do a series of updates. The trick is you don't want to make it hard to implement, right? You don't want to make it hard for an implementer to find all the right pieces and all the right RFCs. I do understand that maybe you don't want to. I mean, how do you eat an elephant, right? You might not want to eat the whole thing all at one time. So by doing little bits and pieces, you may get there easier, but the trick is going to be how do you make sure that it all stitches together properly so that it's implementable in an interoperable way, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. And then there's the like hard question of sort of like when is it worth it to, I guess, do a set of breaking changes. They're like, I don't know. There's some things in the SCIM spec that would realistically get cut, but they're probably at like less than what 0.1% adoption. Like it's hard to measure a lot of these things, but like mainstream adoption can very easily be defined as like certain patterns, certain use cases. But I don't know. There's plenty of people who've been around in the standards, world for a lot longer than I have, who can give guidance as we travel that path.
Yeah, I think I'm going to echo what Deb is saying. Given that there are other areas that we want to tackle, we still need to fulfill the charter. So I think it's more important for us to first agree that the items you've identified, Danny, are ones we want to move forward with, and then we can make a late binding decision. I mean, I like the idea of having a recommended practice, I think, that interoperability profile, because I think it's self-contained. To Paul's point, right? It ensures the whole of SCIM from an interoperable standpoint. So I'm just echoing everybody. To Aaron's point, we don't need to call it anything right now. It's really more for this group to agree that these are the right things that we need to focus on. It doesn't have to be exhaustive, but at least it allows us to make progress.
Yeah, thanks. I see a couple of comments in the chat. Anybody want to jump to the mic to just echo that? Oh, Paulo's in the queue.
Yeah, but my question about that is that doesn't it make it much harder for someone to migrate? So if we have different small sets that make sense by themselves, doesn't it make much more complicated than to go to something that will be the full picture in the version 3 or whatever we are going to call that version. The point is that maybe, and maybe it's just a crazy idea, let's gather all this work and try to stitch it together before releasing separate different RFCs.
I guess the way that I was seeing this draft presented is that it's trimming down what's currently in the core specs rather than there's a lot of new documents that we've been talking about that are adding new things, and I think that's, to me, that seems like more or less what you're talking about, of grouping those together into something that has a single name that's easier to have as a target for implementation. But this draft seems to me more about trimming down the options from what's in the current RFCs.
But maybe, sorry, I don't know if we were still in the same point, but maybe the trimming down is the direction, right? We have, as Danny mentioned, we have so many options, so many implementation that sometimes we start to have problems in the interoperability. Maybe trimming down is the right direction for the next version.
Yeah, Deb?
So I think the question is, if you do the whole thing all at once, you do the big work. If it takes you 10 years, is it worth it? If you did this first, trim it down, and then work at like getting things to where you want them, and you do each piece more quickly, is it better in the long run? Again, I don't know what the right answer is.
I think I'm going to say the first thing is we need to get the group to review this draft and have an opinion as to whether this is the right direction. So Deb, I guess in my view, there's a lot of things happening in the identity space that's going to impact potentially how SCIM may work or the extensions that we need to do for SCIM. I do believe that there are issues currently in getting that interoperability for the current version of SCIM. So I guess I should take my hat off for now, and speaking in at least saying we need to have reviewers and get some level of consensus whether this is an approach for allow us to move forward. Because to your point,
Right.
Deb,
The other thing,
yeah, it'll take too long.
The other thing I will say is I think you need to make it clear that this is an attempt to update the specs by trimming down the options, so that we don't get. So I've been having trouble with some of these drafts being claimed to being sort of marginally out of charter, and I've managed to convince Roman basically that they are in charter. The hardest one was the device one, but we do need to keep it in the charter. I do think it's time for a charter rewrite, and I have cleverly waited until I'm no longer your responsible AD to do that. So yay, me. But
you're welcome to Chris, right?
Yeah. So sorry, Chris, because I meant to do this a while ago. So possibly a charter rewrite will help this. But I think we need a plan. Once we have a plan, the charter will fall out, right?
Can I just say in the conversation, so Deb's been trying to ramp me up here, and she told me a little bit about kind of what needs to be done for rechartering and kind of scope on documents. I'm not there yet, but I feel like listening to this conversation, I haven't exactly heard, and I know that a number of you, been kind of poking at where the participants are from and that kind of stuff. So it feels like you guys have the right community here, but I haven't heard, there's some interoperability problems. That seems like it would be key to me, but I haven't heard, what you guys think is the next set of most important problems. And if it's trimming down the spec, or what the, boy, you have too many extensions, let's do some consolidation if possible. I haven't heard what your biggest pain points are. And it's something I've been listening for, and I haven't heard it yet. And so I don't know that you guys are quite ready, it seems to me, to like kind of write that down.
Yeah. So
just wait till the next presentation. I think we're going to hear some of that in the next session, next presentation.
Well, but that's the rechartering piece. So Chris, to your earlier point on the contextual history, right? The dynamics for when we chartered this group has changed somewhat, just because the original players have also shifted. The struggle with the use cases, even then, is why I'm telling you the changes. Even with the use cases, we were asking those participants to go and reach out to their customer base so that we could capture those pain points. But I'm seeing the industry change very quickly, which is why I'm saying even some of the data may be stale now.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. With that,
and I do want to say I'm not dropping Chris off of a cliff, right? So it's not like I've gone away. I'm still here.
No,
I'm just
no,
not SCIM.
You're not.
Yeah.
And we can help Chris. I mean, this isn't my first rodeo in rechartering either. But we do need to make sure that we get consensus from the group as well, Deb, right? That this is a direction that we want to take. So I think before we close and move on, Aaron, we should solicit feedback on this draft. So if we get volunteers to review this, I can get somebody from Cisco to review it. If we can get others to review, would be good. Just so we could close on some of the earlier items that led us to the original charter.
Yeah, and I saw a couple of comments in the chat that are generally positive. So if any of those folks want to volunteer to review, it'd be great. And then we can keep this moving.
Yep. Thanks, Pam. Okay, we've got at least 2 reviewers. So we can move on.
Okay, great. Pam, is this you presenting?
Primarily, I think Ishmael's going to join in, and some of the others may too.
Okay, would you like the slide control?
I would like the slide control, please.
Great. I'm not going to start a timer because this is the last topic, and we have until we have the full hour. So the time is yours.
Excellent. I will start with a historical overview of what SCIM is. No, I'm just kidding. I'm sure everyone would like to get out of that room or get out of their seats. So we'll try and be very responsible here. Okay, so let's actually start with history, but a concise history. At the last plenary, there were 2 different drafts that had the agentic title. They were, I like to think of them as before their time. One by Mark Wall, one by Macy Abbey, who I think is here. They had similar approaches, but different definitions and depths to them. And so it was agreed on the mailing list that we would try to combine forces. So a group has been meeting, which includes both of the authors of those specs, as well as myself, Danny Zollner, Ishmael from De facto. We have been meeting on this, and so we want to share with you what the progress is, knowing that there's still a lot outstanding, and we want to make sure that we use the mailing list to really dig into detail. And if any of that peanut gallery wants to weigh in, go for it. All right, so here's what we have defined as goals for an agentic extension to SCIM, and I say that is the broadest way to describe it. We do believe that we are looking for the RESTful standardized endpoint that SCIM is. We are looking for an inclusive description of agent, not an exclusive definition. We need it to work in a much broader and very fast moving world. So it needs to be compatible with many different parts of the landscape. And as we said, like, we don't even know what's going to evolve next. It's guaranteed that something will. And specifically, we need this to work across all sorts of implementations, whether they are in themselves generative, whether they are, workloads and workload identity. So it has to be something that many, many types of company can pick up and use, and that can support a lot of objects. So you can see, I mean, we have some general ideas of what we think can happen. We also know what we don't think should happen. We are not looking to be a competitive specification to OAuth client self-registration specifications that exist already, including DCR, or dynamic client registration, or the client ID metadata document specification. Those are the two acronyms listed here. We believe that there are enough other lifecycle activities needed that we don't have to really include self-registration as one of our use cases. Does anyone, any of our peanut gallery, want to add anything else? Okay, we will keep going.
Oh, Justin's in the queue.
Oh, good.
You say, oh, good, but I haven't said anything yet. The question that I have here, because this has kind of come up in my spaces recently, is would it be in scope to have relationships between agents and people, because SCIM fundamentally does most of its work around people, relationships between agents and people actually be represented here. So the runner of an agent is one thing, but also an agent registering for a human, or creating an account that a human would later be able to use, or something like that. Is any of that part of this process, or sort of those kinds of weird combinatorial use cases, part of the thinking here?
So I think it has to be. And the hilarious thing is that became much clearer to me in the last 2 hours based on a number of discussions, including Danny's presentation on the group members. So in fact, if we move to the context and use case, the piece we don't have in here that is really the epiphany is, yes, the intersection with /users is incredibly important. If agents need to request access to a group in order to get access to a resource, then, and that group is managed via SCIM, then we should, implementers will need to be able to say, here's the 100 members of this group, and 10 of them are agents and 90 of them are humans. So I think the answer is absolutely yes, and that the use cases are going to become more clear. But if you have specific use cases, you talked about a couple just there that I hadn't even thought of. I don't know about the rest of the group.
Yeah, one relationship we have explicitly talked about is the relationship of a group or user to an agent as the owner of that agent. That as one example, Justin.
Right. And yeah, I mean, agents may have managers in theory. I mean, a digital coworker scenario. The other one is the computer using agent scenario, where a computer is manipulating, you know, digital assets as if they were a human. I think all of these need to be addressed. The question is whether beyond that, this type of interface would lend itself to an agentic control plane or not. And this is where we had a lot of really interesting discussions in the group. And we'll go through some of the use cases here and talk through them. One of the, I think it's actually the next slide here. Let me just make sure. I think we've got most of this. One of the big questions that was discussed was, how do you know what kind of agent you're looking at and whether that agent can speak a specific language? So that this third bullet on agentic protocol discoverability, we thought might be really important. So if you don't know if that agent can use A to A, or if you don't know they can use MCP, then perhaps this is a way to get access, for example, to the agent card or to the data in the agent card in a way that's specific, that you can ask and not know whether it's a human or an agent you're talking about until you ask the question and get the answer. Let's keep going. So if we look at the similarities to what happens today in the SCIM interface, lots of things are similar. It's still an object model. And, you know, we're using agent, as we said before, in a very broad sense. So, you know, what do agents and users have in common? Well, they do have a life cycle. You have to perform the CRUD operations. And most of, at least in my experience, most of the conversation happening right now is about connecting the agents, not about what happens next. And so that's why SCIM could come in to do this, because we aren't yet thinking about what happens when you need to disable that agent. Or I'm sure some people are, but this is what we're talking about. Excuse me, I'm sorry. So when you think about the similarities, agents can be members of groups. Agents may have to go through approval workflows. I'm so sorry. I talked too much and now my throat is scratchy. Okay, trying to recover here. So those are the things we think have a direct correlation. Beyond that, we think that there might be more. We think there could be intersections with understanding the status of an agent. Has an agent been approved? Is an agent available but not yet instantiated? You know, that question of publishing of agents may or may not be something that's a bridge too far in this spec. Anyone else? Any of y'all want to? Okay.
Yeah, one thing I'll add, Pam, that I typed out in the chat was that just in general as a group, we've been aligning around kind of less is more, and that like there's a risk to adding more and more features to the initial specification.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ishmael, is Ishmael online? I'm not sure if Ishmael, he said that oh, here we go.
Oh, I see. Ishmael is using the light client. Are you in the room or just in the wrong? What? You can't unmute in the light client, I think. So make sure you join the full one.
All right, well, in that case, Ishmael, if you want to just drop and join with the full client, I will skip this one and then you can come back and talk to it. Oh, well, that's pretty well what we have as far as next steps. So, you know, we can talk about the spiffy thing. I do think it's really important. What we want to do is do this on the mailing list because we want as wide a contribution as possible. Nobody wants to make this thing as an academic exercise, but because of, you know, the use cases that really are intersectional with existing SCIM implementations, I think that something will need to be done. It's just a question of how hog wild we go with it. And I see Paul's comment about us to go in and present, I think, in the OpenID Foundation. And if that's what you're saying, then I think we'd be all for that. We do have some additional discussion points. So there are, you know, there are other points about MCP and A2A that we can talk through as well. They are in the deck. But we'll just wait for a second for Ishmael to come back. And then hopefully, you know, hopefully folks can apply a good critical lens to this. Like we said, you know, I don't think we want to be super prescriptive about what an agent is here. What we want to do is allow for CRUD operations on, you know, and whatever definitions of metadata can be standardized about any kind of agent. There we go.
Hey, thanks, Pam. Sorry about that. So one of the things that we are looking at in this specification is also support for SPIFFE provisioning. SPIFFE is a widely adopted workload identity system, and we are increasingly seeing it used as or in AI agent scenarios. And on top of that, the relationship between SPIFFE and OAuth is currently being formalized. I believe there's the OAuth specification, which is in progress in the OAuth working group right now. So now that SPIFFE, we know that it does an amazing job at the runtime, attestation, credential issuance, lifecycle management at the endpoint level, but there is a gap. And that gap is in terms of how the workload identity metadata or the agent metadata gets provisioned between systems, and that is undefined today. So the identity entry that SPIFFE attests against, who creates it, how does it get there, how does it get cross domains? There's no specification for that today. So we're looking potentially to add that as part of this proposal. And I also think this would be the real test to what was said before in terms of the extensibility beyond OAuth, because SPIFFE has works differently. So the SCIM would provision just the registration, but the credentials of SPIFFE would be obtained separately. So the use cases are there on the slide, but the overarching goal is quite simple here. One provisioning pipeline. So today, if you're managing users, SPIFFE workloads or agents, they're all done through separate systems, separate tools. We want, or we would like that to have one SCIM integrated pipeline through the same IDP that is currently already used as part of your infrastructure. Back to you, Pamela.
Perfect. So I will put it back on the call to action. We can talk through the additional discussion if we have time and if there's interest. But I would love to just have folks weigh in on whether this makes sense. Does it pass the spit test? I also don't know really what a spit test is, but I'm pretty sure I don't want to know. I will say there are a couple of issues that we know are going to be sticky already. One of them is durability. So there is a natural latency to existing SCIM implementations. Part of why we had to do pagination was because of that. because of the potential chance that something gets created or deleted before a given SCIM call can be executed on. So the question of very, very ephemeral agentic presences or instantiations, that's, whether those make sense to use the SCIM interface for, we don't know. The other one, of course, is the classic OAuth class versus instance question. Is what you need to represent via SCIM, if it's an agent, the instantiation of the agent, the unique in time and space instantiation of the agent, or is it the class of agent that could be instantiated? I think that one is another, rough question, both for OAuth and SCIM, in fact. So those are the things we're thinking about. I won't take anyone's time after this, but we are very open for anyone who would like to participate or contribute, and we will be bringing a draft for everyone to consider here. And we appreciate your time.
Yes, Bjorn.
As I'm listening to this, it's hard to me to differentiate between what's an agent and what's a work instance and a workload. So, Pam, as you guys are drafting or creating your draft, I think it's very crucial to define terms and what we mean by an agent, or in what the use case is for this effort as it applies to SCIM.
Yeah, that makes great sense. And part of that is what use case, the use cases in theory should drive those definitions as well. If we are only talking about agentic presences as equivalents to user presences for the purpose of governance and workflow and consumption of resources, that might be one thing. If we are looking at a much broader SPIFFE-based representation, I think that changes. So trying to find something that we can either refer to or define, you're right, will be important. Thank you. Any thoughts from our AD contingent?
From the cheap seats and the newbie, I'm super excited. I want to kind of see what you guys are bringing to the table. So you're hitting on a bunch of areas that I think everybody knows are really topical at the moment, right? I mean, these are questions that seemingly are unanswered, and folks are asking the IETF, what are we going to do here? It'll be a question about how fast we can react on that, but I think you guys are feeling that pressure in your day job, so I don't need to do anything about that per se. Looking at your charter, quick read versus, kind of this conversation, this is kind of exciting to me. Obviously this would require some charter work. I would like to understand how it kind of, I mean, you mentioned Spiffy. I haven't heard Whimsy. I don't know if that comes into play. I've heard OAuth. I don't have all that put together yet. Maybe Deb has a better handle on that than I do. But I mean, this is all positive for me. I want to help, but I'm not an expert in this area. I'm looking for you guys to kind of at least have some notional path of what your way forward is. So I mean, I want to help that happen.
What he said. I told you this was going to be a trade up.
Perfect. Thank you.
I just wanted to point out that there is quite a number of proposals right now being discussed about agentic AI discovery, DNS-based, new exciting protocol-based. So yeah, at some point, I think we need to decide what is the IETF rough consensus way forwards for this.
Don't go away, Yaroslav. Do you, how much of this stuff is related to the paper that you guys wrote, the draft that you have?
We don't really go into discovery intentionally because we see that as a net new problem. But when it comes to the way you do agentic AI identifiers, authentication, authorization, discovery is kind of orthogonal for the most part. So I don't see a choice between, let's say, using SCIM or DNS or something else is defining the rest of the framework building blocks. And I see Peter is in the queue. So Peter, maybe you want to jump in.
So I do think it's exciting to be able to handle a lot of this with protocols and work that we already have in flight and in process, right? So it's not always required to invent something new for something like this.
Absolutely. Though one thing I'm personally, and I haven't spent as much time as I probably should thinking about if SCIM is the right way for agentic AI discovery. But I mean, some people anticipate that AI agents will be spawned dynamically, live very shortly in certain environments. So we might have very robust mechanisms to signal that. And today, in my experience, SCIM is typically used for more long-lived things like users and groups and things that live longer typically than seconds or milliseconds.
So I can just respond to that quickly. I think we absolutely agree. And I think the other piece is schema, right? I think lots of different places will be writing schema. And if we can all harmonize on that schema, everyone is happier. You know, I don't think we would want, I don't think we would want to invent our own special sauce here. And so, yeah, I think making everything agree on the types of metadata to be sent, and then just using different transport mechanisms to achieve certain goals would be, you know, the best outcome.
Peter, would you like to add something to what I said, or is it something completely different?
Yeah, so this is actually something, at least as I get an echo, so I'm going to stand back from my mic. I think there is this, in terms of the AI authentication and authorization draft, there is a section that talks or also looks at provisioning. And maybe there is sort of, I've been thinking that there might be a space there specifically to talk about SCIM. Currently, the spec doesn't talk, basically talks about like runtime provisioning, you know, but there is sort of this other component around, okay, where does all that metadata come from for that attestation management, the identifiers, and so on. And so I think there's kind of a nice little slot where SCIM can fit into. I think one of the premises of the paper or of the draft that we wrote is we're really modeling agents as workloads. And so I think in that sense, that's been a very helpful construct, right? Because the moment you think about a workload, suddenly there's all these tools that you have that you can use already. And maybe that's something, as Pam, as you and Ishmael and others are working on this, is to just sort of keep sort of that mapping in mind so that it's going to be easier to be compatible with that authentication and authorization draft.
One thing that I would add to that is provisioning. The way it applies to workloads is typically quite different than provisioning that applies to users. Provisioning workloads means that the workload is born and it is typically provisioned only once. And in terms of SCIM, I think, again, translating that to somewhat like agentic AI language, it's really more about discovery. So SCIM is not used to get users born, right? They're born typically in different ways. It's used more about, again, terminology is tricky, but it's more about discovery of users.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, we need to tell the difference between, just having a definition of what a durable asset would be versus to me, I call that an ephemeral asset, right? It's born, it dies, it lives once. It may be rubber stamped from some kind of, or cookie cuttered. And maybe it's the cookie cutter that has to be the subject of the approval workflows or governance. But I think we just don't know what we don't know, but we're open to learn.
An observation maybe on that, Pam, I think even ephemeral workloads, there is persistent data that's associated with that, right? You mentioned schema, things like that. Somewhere you have to store all these things around, okay, how am I going to construct the identifier? What's my policies around this thing and so on? And so maybe that's a space, and maybe that's just a conversation that we need to continue having.
Bjorn, did you want to jump in?
Just quickly. Just highlighting, I think the key here again is defining the use case, and that's where this work is going to fit into SCIM. Also mentioning that there was a similar conversation in the OAuth working group, and George Fletcher sent out an email kind of highlighting that instead of trying to find a solution, defining what the problem is. And defining the use cases is a way of defining what the problem is they're trying to solve. That's all.
That's a big act on that one. Absolutely.
Thanks. Peter, I think that's an old hand in the queue, right? I'm going to take that as a yes. Justin,
Yes,
go ahead.
that is an old hand. Sorry.
So yeah, just a really big plus to everything that people have been saying. I think one of the biggest challenges here for this is that we don't really, as an industry, have a good handle about what we want an agent to be or an agent entity to be, because maybe it makes sense to provision a class of agents like Pam was talking about. Maybe that's the thing that we want to explicitly push along, and then we recognize them as part of subclasses or something like that. I am skeptical, quite honestly, that SCIM is the right protocol to handle this kind of thing, but I think that it will be a valuable exercise to try and see what's there. Because this is something that the identity industry as a whole is really, really struggling with right now. We don't know whether to treat this as software, as people, as something that is software that is like a people. We really don't have it. Like I've seen in the field implementations that are like, remind me of Active Directory service accounts, which is a software that is pretending to be a people because that's all that Active Directory knows how to do. And I've seen other systems where it gets treated closer to a workload because, oh, it's an autonomous system, it lives in a context, and that's all well and good, except that it's also on behalf, acting on behalf of somebody eventually somewhere up the chain. And that's not even getting into some of the more complex scenarios where agents are creating other agents and agents have to call software that calls other software that calls the thing that actually needs to do the thing for the user, where the user's rights actually live is also somewhere else. It's saying it's turtles all the way down is doing a gross disservice to turtles. I think that it is ultimately, like I said, a good experiment to try and see how this fits, because having a schema, having a common language to talk about it would be super, super useful. What I expect, though, is kind of the blind man and the elephant all over again. I think a lot of people are going to want different aspects of this, and they're going to want it to look a different way and do a different thing. But I also don't think that we quite have all of those perspectives written down yet. So, yeah, roundabout way of saying, let's give it a shot and fail spectacularly.
Very cool. So what I'm hearing actually is that before we bring a draft in, we should bring in some use cases. That seems like a couple of people have mentioned that. So I will take that back as feedback. Okay, Aaron, I think we can pass it back to you unless any of the other group members wanted to add any final points.
Yeah. Grace, do you want to come to the mic with what you dropped in chat?
Sure. So I'm Grace. So yeah, what was pointed out in that last comment as well, like if you think about what China Mobile is doing right now, that they demonstrated, it's like, okay, we've got all these agents within our network, and each agent is deployed by us, China Mobile, to do network optimization. And then it really does look like a workload, and it is controlled centrally. And so you're not, like, it's a very different situation. Whereas you've got this open claw model where it's like a person in China Mobile was looking at that, like, and they were saying, and again, these are more proprietary organizations, but they were saying, well, every person is going to have their little army of AIs. And in that case, if I, as a human being, deploy the AI to do a task on my behalf, you really have to think about, like, who's the owner of the AI? What did the AI have authority to do? And, you know, what tasks did I give it to do? And so then AI looks much more like individual decentralized identity. And so these are completely different ways of thinking about what an agent is. And I think that the architectures are going to have to look very different, because in the case of a telecom using all of their own AI agents within them, you don't ask the question, oh, who's responsible for deploying this thing and who has to pay for their airline ticket if the AI agent made a mistake. It's just a completely different thought process.
Yaroslav?
I would respectfully disagree with that assessment. I don't think workloads are defined by centralized management. If I have a piece of software running on my laptop doing something, it's still a workload. It still doesn't necessarily have human identity. I might have authorized that workload to act on my behalf, to book me tickets or transfer money away or doing something. But it's not it's not me. I think that is the fundamental difference between how we identify agents versus humans. Now, again, the question of ownership, the question of control, the question of human bound human identity is again more of a question of authorization, claims, and delegation rather than the nature of identity of AI agents.
Great. Well, sounds like we're wrapping up the discussion. I did only ask for 90 minutes for this meeting, but they gave us 2 hours instead. And it looks like we needed about 90 minutes. So that was well timed. Any other closing thoughts? Otherwise, it sounds like we have a good list of next steps for various folks here. Appreciate everybody who volunteered to review documents. So looking forward to seeing those on the list. If there's nothing else, I think we can call this early and give people back a little bit of extra time for the break. Sounds good. Thanks, everybody, and see you in the next session. This is yours. Yeah, sorry, somehow I picked them up. Thank you. I was looking for those.